Hey, it's Carly here from Equipped for Battle. Today I'm going to talk to you about astrology. This is going to be a hard one for many of you to hear. I'm going to talk to you about why astrology is a sin. If you've watched any of my other videos, you can understand that I was into this stuff. I was into occult practices, but I was also very heavily into astrology and zodiac signs. And I really identified with my zodiac sign. I really identified with sun rising, moon rising. I kind of knew a lot about it. And I also educated my friends and people around me about it with the crystals and everything. It all kind of fits together in this new Western way of how we created this horoscope with the crystals and meditation and everything. It's all kind of packaged in this little bubble, and I was definitely in that bubble. Definitely in that. And I practice it to a T, especially during my meditation practices, and that's, I was the astrology girl. It is kind of all together. So there's this like bubble of spirituality, and zodiac signs and astrology is right there. It's right in the middle, and it's kind of the root of what's happening right now. I know a lot of people are into crystals and not astrology and vice versa, but it becomes, you kind of surround yourself with this way of thinking and this way of life. But I noticed something about myself when I was dealing with these zodiac signs and dealing with astrology, is I really started revolving my world and my thoughts and my feelings around what the stars were doing and what the moon was doing, what the sun was doing. And I really heavily got into this weird headspace where what the universe was doing or telling me, that's how I would guide my life. I also would take on the identity of my zodiac sign and what it means for me and who I am. And I would see that with my friends too and what their signs were. So not only had I removed myself from who I should be and who I would come to be now, but I also kind of removed like what made me special and what made me who I am, because I identified with all the other Libras out there. Needless to say, there is a certain kind of like losing yourself in this if you allow it. And I know a lot of people just read it for fun. I don't know how to speak to that too much. I myself try to stay away from it, and sometimes it's difficult because I know so much about it that it comes up in conversation, I think, every time I hang out with my friends, and I really have to find the boundaries of, do I just share information I know about this because it's for fun, or do I not participate in it anymore? And that can be difficult for someone who's lived in it. I've been a Christian for about a year now, and I don't identify with what I used to identify with. But I think there's a balance. I think that if it's a conversation that's coming up, that's a good way to use that conversation for who you are now as a follower of Jesus. Okay, so let's take it back. We're going to go back to Mesopotamia. That's where it all started. So that's where like Babylon and the ancient East, like the places you read about in the Old Testament, the Bible basically, where they talk about divination and crystals and magic and all these things. This is where astrology kind of got its inception. Astrology was a way for the ancient Babylonians to read the stars and kind of make sense of the stars and everything around them for divination purposes. The reason why they used this is because the universe was speaking to them, right? About life and what they wanted to spiritually figure out in their own life. And the kings specifically would use divination through astrology purposes to find answers through dreams and whatever decisions they needed to make for the monarchy. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know exactly what God says about divination purposes. But on top of that, there's another layer of idolatry, because the Mesopotamians already were using the heavenly bodies, which is the stars and the moon and the sun, and they were kind of using astrology as a way to represent like who they're actually trying to go to for answers, which was the universe at large. Eventually, this kind of migrated to like the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. It might have been when they kind of took over this area through military practices, or if it just migrated before that, I'm not quite sure. And I don't think historians are quite sure on that, at least from what I read. But especially the ancient Greeks really took astrology and ran with it. They had their gods, right? We all have learned about the gods. If you've watched Disney's Hercules at all, you kind of have a little bit of background on them. But they would take these, and again, it was a way to praise the heavenly bodies like the stars, sun, moon, and then they were the ones who kind of took that and had the zodiac signs and names put to these. What emerged from this was the zodiac signs, sun rising, moon rising. I mean, we can go in depth. This is a separate class altogether, what astrology is. But basically, what we use today in Western culture, this is the astrology that the Greeks kind of took from Mesopotamia and put their own spin to it with their own gods. So we're already talking about idolatry for just another culture, and then also putting the zodiac signs to it. And they also created birthing charts through this. This was a way that they made decisions about when to get married, when to give birth, when the ideal time for anything was. And they really based a lot of decisions on this chart and what the stars and the moon and the sun were doing in the sky. Now, when we think about how the ancient Greeks and the ancient Mesopotamians used this, does it sound familiar? I don't know how many times I've heard people say, well, we can't get married that time of the year because my astrologist said that we can't, because the sun and the moon and Venus and Mars are not aligned enough for this to be a good marriage or compatible. Or celebrities so often are talking about, well, I'm glad that I had my son or my daughter during this time of the year because that's when the chart said they're going to become this rich and famous person. It's nonsense. This is exactly what celebrities are doing today. It's what the religious leaders did back in the ancient times, and also what the monarchs did back then to make any decision with their life. And this is exactly what the celebrities today, especially in the United States, are bringing to our culture. And I see it so often with people that they are making decisions if their marriage is going to last based on when they get married within their zodiac chart. I mean, you're trusting words from people who are sitting behind a keyboard typing these things up, or an astrologist saying to you from across the table, this is what the universe is communicating to you. I'm sorry, but the universe cannot communicate with you. You are not communicating with the universe. It cannot communicate with you and tell you the answers for if your marriage will work out if you get married during a certain time, or if your child will become something so special because that's what the stars told you or the astrologist. So there's two main issues here with astrology. The first one is that it is stripping people away from their identity of who they are in Christ. What do I mean by that? Astrology and zodiac signs, they kind of make it seem like the universe is telling you who you are and who you should be and what will happen and what decisions to make and who to marry and when to give birth and yada, yada, yada. Okay? It's stripping you from not only your freedom that Christ can give you, but it's stripping you from your identity and who you are. It's stripping you from making these certain decisions in your life because you think that the universe is guiding you in a different direction. When we give our decision making over to something that was created by God in the first place, which is the universe, the stars, the sun, and the moon, we are listening to objects who aren't listening back. That's just the truth. The sun and the moon and Venus and Mars, if they align a certain way, that's not for your benefit or for your downfall. It's just the way things happen. We need to stop ascribing certain magical remedies to how the natural state of the universe is. When we are stripped from our identity in Christ, we are stripped from what God has created us to be, and that's the uniqueness that He put inside of you. You are a unique individual, and if we keep using astrology and zodiac signs to tell us and guide us in our everyday life and tell us who we are, we're missing out on how God created us and the uniqueness of who you are and what you have to offer in this world. We see this anyways. I mean, take out astrology, take out zodiac signs. People want to fit into the mold so much that your uniqueness in Christ gets lost in that. But you are special and you are so unique in so many ways that you don't even understand yet. I mean, I'm making YouTube videos. I literally have no background in camera making YouTube videos. I had to do so much research to do this, but you know what? As soon as I accepted Christ into my life, He gave me a calling and He gave me a job for what He needed me to do. And I feel like this has always kind of been in me, but when I tell you He equips the unequipped, He does. But also, I, for so long in all my life, thought I wasn't special or unique, and I just wanted to be part of the crowd, and I would just I would kill this creative part of me because I wanted to be part of everyone else. But you don't need to do that. You are a unique creation, and you have a job to do, and you should not be listening to zodiac signs and astrology especially to tell you who you are or what decisions to make in your life. You become a shell of who you should be. These zodiac signs are man-made, And they literally cannot tell you who you are. And also, they're just so generic that it could sound like this is part of your personality. But it's part of everyone's personality at certain times in their life. Sad to say, like, it is just so generic the way they write these things that it's a part of you in any season of your life, whether you want to believe it or not. And I think people are so desperate for identity, and they're so desperate for something, like, there's more to life, right? There's more, like, we know in our hearts, we know deep down in our souls that there's more to life than this, than just going to work every day and getting paid and working towards vacation. There is more. There is something that you're trying to unlock, and you're trying to figure out the secret of why we're here and who you are. And astrology and zodiac signs that are man-made will never give you that fulfillment that you're looking for. Why you're here is what God can give you the answers to. And sometimes that answer may not come for years and years and years to come. But you will find that identity in Christ, and you will figure out who you have been all along, or who He is creating you to be in the long run. And that peace, once you realize you give the control over to God and the creator of the universe, who created you as a unique person, and you're not listening to zodiac signs or astrology, you give away this pressure to conform to what society is telling you to be and what these divination type practices are telling you to be. Because God has a plan for you. I mean, ultimately, that loneliness you feel in your heart, that something is missing, you don't even know it yet, but you are yearning, and your soul is crying out for its creator. And that loneliness and that hole in your heart can only be filled by the grace of God and who He wants you to be and the goodness that He can bring into your life. And this is just not something that you can get from man-made astrology or zodiac signs. They will not fill that loneliness or that void in your heart that you're looking for. They cannot tell you who you are ultimately as a person, because you are unique and created by God. Okay, so that point was so important because I feel like that's exactly what I was searching for, was a purpose and identity in this life. And I felt like zodiacs and astrology and all the occult practices that I was doing gave me that purpose in life. It made me feel special. It made me feel spiritual. It made me feel enlightened, as they say. But the second point to this and why astrology is a sin is because, point blank, it's witchcraft. Astrology and witchcraft are alike because they dabble in occult practices for spiritual enlightenment, for divination purposes, and for you to find identity in what these things are trying to give you. Also, they can both be a route to opening demonic doorways. Some faster than others. I mean, I've made many videos about that, so please go back and check them out. But zodiacs and astrology is a form of idolatry and divination, and they're sins that can kind of take root and create these doorways where evil spirits can come in. That's exactly what happened to me. I was demonically attacked for what I was kind of dabbling in at the time, and astrology was part of that puzzle piece that I really had to separate myself from, really unglue myself from what I had been practicing that whole time, and it took many, many layers of what I was getting into. But witchcraft and astrology really go hand in hand. They really are, they're alike. They represent a way of divination to look to the stars or look to the earth other than God Himself. We're going to look at Isaiah 47:13 through 15, and I want you to really listen to me when I talk about this, because this is God specifically speaking on astrology and these kind of divination occult practices and how they can't save people, and they couldn't save the people back then, but they're also not going to save you in the long run. So let's read this real quick. All the counsel you have received has only worn you out. Let your astrologers come forward, those stargazers who make predictions month by month. Let them save you from what is coming upon you. Surely they are like stubble. The fire will burn them up. They cannot even save themselves from the power of the flame. These are not coals for warmth. This is not a fire to sit by. That is all they are to you. These you have dealt with and labored with since childhood. All of them go on in their error. There is not one that can save you. Ooh. So this is my first time going through the Bible, and the first time I read that, I understood exactly what it was saying because I was dabbling in this at the time. And the fact that it talks about stargazers and astrology, and God talks about these people and calls them out specifically by name, when he's calling them out by name and saying, let them save you. They can't even save themselves. Let them save you with their astrology and witchcraft practices. That is big. That is real big. That tells you that God is fed up. He is fed up with people looking to the stars, something that he created for answers. The stargazers, let them save you. Meanwhile, I'm over here and I have all the answers. This is God speaking. Meanwhile, I am your father and I want to carry you along and I want to save you basically from yourselves at this point, right? This is when he's talking to the Israelites in Isaiah. And this is a prophetic book, so this is talking about the future, but he was sick and tired of it. And when you talk about astrology and stargazing, that's exactly what we're dealing with today in our society. That has just become so embedded that people in the church don't even realize it's a sin anymore. There's a demonic realm out there where these evil spirits attach themselves to these man-made devices for divination and occult purposes so that you can open these doorways and find power through demonic ways, through demonic openings. And that is just the truth. Like, I know I'm going to get made fun of for saying this by some people, but it is the truth. I've witnessed it. These things seem so innocent because people made it, right? Like, people created these things. People themselves created these occult-like practices, astrology and zodiac signs. I've been saying it all along, right? But the thing is that these demons out there, they are looking for any way to get a foothold into your life, especially if you're a Christian. And it's a way for your downfall, and it's a way to kind of divert your gaze from God and the Creator and bring you down this pathway of just focusing on these practices that seem so light and spiritual, and these spiritual awakenings that seem so innocent, but really you are walking down this pathway farther and farther away from the grace and love of God and your Creator. Look, I love space. I love looking at space. I love looking at the stars and the moon and the sun, everything that God created. It is so beautiful, and it's created for us to gaze at in awe at the glory of God. It really is. But it was never created for us to go to for idolatry purposes. It was never for us to praise these things. It was us to give glory to the beauty and the magnificence of God, that he could create such gorgeous and beautiful and abstract and just convoluted things that we don't understand sometimes, but they're there. And it's beautiful. And these things that we are attributing to magical practices and spiritual awakenings, they're beautiful. I love researching physics and space. I love that. It's such a huge hobby of mine. But I don't praise them anymore. I did before, I'm going to be honest, I did. I found my answers from zodiac and astrology, but that is not where I find my answers and my calling anymore. As soon as I accepted Jesus Christ into my life, that is where I find my connection to the Creator of all these things that are just so beautiful to gaze at and awe at his beauty and give to the glory of God. So if you are wrapped up in this astrology and the zodiac sign way of living, you may find that once you kind of cut the cord on this, that it may be difficult. Even if you feel like you weren't really that involved, you may find that it might be difficult in the long run to kind of get away from these things. You can always come back to God. He is waiting for you with open arms. And that is the beauty that we should awe at. Hey, this is Equipped for Battle. I'm Carly. Thank you so much for watching my last video. Like the video, share it, especially if you think it's going to help somebody, and subscribe. I'm making content all the time and I don't want you to miss any of the videos.